Wow, thank you so much to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts Radical Elite Show Band for kicking us off and getting us energized as we embark upon what is sure to be a fantastic learning experience over the next few hours. During this time, you will be learning how communities and districts are moving from recovery to thriving by leveraging their American Rescue Plan funds in support of learning recovery, mental health, and labor shortages. Now, it is my great honor to introduce a lifelong educator committed to students, a parent himself, and one who deeply understands the struggles that our schools and families have faced over the past 2 years. Our U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona.
Thank you, Sheetal. I also want to thank the Radical Elite Show Band from the Duke Ellington School of the Arts here in Washington, D.C. for your amazing performance. This summit is an exciting opportunity for everyone here to learn about the effective strategies that can best leverage the American Rescue Plan dollars so that students like those at Duke Ellington and all over the country can thrive in the recovery from the pandemic and beyond. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan funds, or ARP funds, schools are open for in-person learning, but that's just the beginning. By working together and leveraging partnerships between the public and private sectors that put students first, we can meet this moment as a nation. We can make sure our school communities have the supports they need. And we can reimagine our education system so that it truly serves all students well. At the Department of Education, we're 100% committed to partnering with you in this work. And today, I'm excited to join you virtually to share some initiatives that will widen the impact of ARP. First, we're doubling down on summer learning opportunities. I'm excited that the National Summer Learning Association is relaunching its website called discoversummer.org. This site will help students and families find summer learning programs that are right for them. Every child in America should have an opportunity to engage in learning this summer. We're also lifting up commitments from the philanthropic sector to support students' learning recovery, mental health, and social emotional development. Our partnership with the National Public Education Support Fund is a great example of that. It's a network of funder networks and intentional public-private collaboration to help ensure that ARP funds have a deep and lasting impact in communities. It really shows that it takes a village. We know education is the best way to propel our progress, and we know when our students' social emotional well-being and mental health suffer, they're more likely to struggle academically. I'm really proud that millions of dollars from ARP are expanding access to mental health services for children and families. In fact, after a year of ARP support, we've seen a 65% increase in social workers and a 20% increase in counselors in our schools. Programs like Nashville's Navigator are cutting edge. This district-wide program matches students with a caring adult in their school for intentional, one-on-one check-ins. Every student is known. Every student is respected, supported, and every student hears their name in school. This is so important. We know the power of relationships. Students excel in school when they feel safe and when they feel connected to friends and teachers. In addition to supporting students' social emotional development and mental health, we're seeing districts use ARP funds to help students catch up on academic learning. Districts are investing in well-designed and effective tutoring, mentoring, and academic coaching, as well as after-school, summer, and Saturday programs. We need more of this. For example, Baltimore schools are tapping into the talents of paraeducators to help students catch up. This program also develops a pipeline of paraeducators who can eventually become teachers. This matters when schools are facing teacher shortages at a time when students need outstanding educators the most. Investing in our teachers is investing in our students. That's why we're doing more to invest in the teaching profession. We're building a robust teacher pipeline and strengthening teacher development programs like Supporting Effective Educators Development Program, or SEED. The SEED program supports evidence-based practices to prepare, develop, and enhance the skills of educators. Programs like Red Hawks Rising in New Jersey show what's possible here. It's a dual enrollment teacher pipeline program among the district, Montclair State University, and the American Federation of Teachers. We need more innovative models like these. And today, the Treasury Department is releasing guidance that makes it clearer how governors, mayors, and other leaders could use $350 billion to hire school staff and increase compensation. This is all possible through ARP's state and local fiscal recovery funds. Especially amid the pandemic, another thing became clear. Ensuring success for every student means connectivity for every student. That's why the FCC's Emergency Connectivity Fund program is a game changer. It furnishes schools and libraries with laptops, tablet computers, hotspots, modems, routers, and broadband. At the department, we'll make sure state and local leaders know how to put ARP funds to work for our students. We'll keep providing technical assistance and resources to our states, districts, schools, and colleges. We are in this together. And we'll keep supporting the mental health and academic needs of our students, our educators, and our families to set them on a path to success. I'm confident that together, we can achieve a long-term equitable recovery and reimagine education to make it better than ever before. Together, we can rebuild our education system on a stronger, more equitable foundation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia's 3rd District, and I chair the House Committee on Education and Labor. Thank you to all of the educators, advocates, and partners joining today for your work to help our nation's students get through this pandemic. As we recover from COVID-19, each of us has the challenging task of addressing achievement gaps and social and emotional challenges spurred by the pandemic. The American Rescue Plan was one of the most significant steps we've taken to help school districts and educators address these challenges. This historic package delivered $130 billion to K-12 schools, the largest one-time federal investment in K-12 education in our nation's history. These investments help schools open safely and stay open safely. Importantly, at least 20% of the funding districts received is required to go towards closing achievement gaps by addressing learning loss and supporting students' social and emotional needs. Education leaders have already put these funds to good use. In my district, schools have used funding to hire additional teachers and tutors and fix dilapidated ventilation systems. Portland Public Schools used funding to expand and lower the cost of after-school programming. Atlanta Public Schools extended their school day by 30 minutes. Chicago Public Schools hired an army of nurses, counselors, and social workers. Simply put, districts are using these funds from the American Rescue Plan to meet students where they are and support their growth and development. Unfortunately, we know that the consequences of the pandemic fell harder on some districts and students than others. According to a recent study, by the start of the 2021-2022 school year, the gap in reading and math scores between students in majority Black schools and students in majority white schools was 3 months wider than it was before the pandemic. In response, the American Rescue Plan allocated funding using the Title I-A formula, so the greatest resources went to communities with the greatest need. As a result, low-income areas received an infusion of funding at a level that they've never seen before. So I want to thank my colleagues in the Biden-Harris administration for coming together to deliver this historic achievement for our school districts across the country. And as we look beyond the pandemic, I remain committed to working with you, the educators, the advocates, and partners to ensure that all students have the opportunity to reach their full potential. So thank you again for joining this afternoon and for all you do on behalf of students, parents, and educators.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, for your leadership in helping bring these critical resources to support our students, districts, and communities. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Jean Sperling, White House ARP Coordinator and Senior Advisor to the President. Jean's leadership, passion and commitment to this work is inspiring not only to us at the department, but we know also to those who are impacted the most in our communities and districts across the country. Education is personal for Gene. His mother was an educator for over 40 years who was committed to addressing the racial achievement gap and promoting individualized learning. Previously, Gene served as the director of the National Economic Council and National Economic Advisor to both Presidents Obama and President Clinton. He is the only person to hold that position for 2 presidents. He was also a key architect of the 1993 economic plan during the Clinton administration and a key negotiator in the 1997 balanced budget agreement that eventually led to the Children's Health Initiative program, higher education tax relief, and played leadership roles in the creation of the New Markets Tax Credit, community development financial institutions, Gear Up, debt relief for low-income nations, and anti-sweatshop and anti-child labor initiatives. Sperling is the founder and first executive director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution, a center that focuses on education for girls and boys in developing nations. He is co-author of What Works in Girls' Education, Evidence on the World's Best Investment, which includes a foreword by Malala Yousafzai. It is clear that Gene cares deeply about our nation's students, families, and communities. This is why we are honored to have him here with us this evening to make a few remarks. Gene?
Thank you, Sheetal, for that nice introduction. I am so honored to follow 2 of my heroes in education, Secretary Cardona, who I've gotten to know so well, both his mind, his expertise, but also his heart, and Chairman Bobby Scott, who I have worked on since my first year in the White House and his first year in Congress in 1993. If you want to talk about someone who is a nonstop champion for children, that is Chairman Scott. I am also incredibly honored that President Biden asked me to be the coordinator for the American Rescue Plan. I believe this $130 billion that you've heard about for the K through 12 programs and schools around our country is one of the most important parts of the American Rescue Plan. Yes, you will hear about the funding going to help take schools from 50% closed to 99% not just open, but safe and open, with more investments for HVACs, ventilators, lead abatement, all the different things that allow us to say that schools open, not only open, but open safely. But what's really shows the most wisdom in the design of the American Rescue Plan is that it understood it was not just about a crisis emergency reopening in 2021 and the beginning of 2022, but that we needed to ensure there were the resources and the time needed to help address the ramifications, the often negative ramifications of this once in 102 year pandemic. And that's what the American Rescue Plan does. It is also providing the school districts across our country with the resources and funds to take on the losses in learning that too many children have experienced, to have extra resources, as you've heard, to deal and help children get more support in emotional and mental health issues, as the president talked about in his unity agenda in the State of the Union. Now, I will tell you, as you heard, I am the son of an educator. My mother was the founder of the Family Learning Institute in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I watched for 20, 30 years, children have their lives turned around by an individual mentor, a tutor who could take individual time with them. When we dedicated that building to my mother, one of the people that was highlighted was a guy named Nick Hill. When he was in 4th grade, he was headed, as he said, nowhere, because he felt so embarrassed about being behind so much in reading. A single tutor as he said, turned his life around, not just because he caught up in education, but he said it affected his entire confidence. What happened to Nick Hill? He went on a football scholarship to Michigan State, and now he is a financial analyst at Morgan Stanley. And he will tell you that individual tutoring, that extra help, that individualized attention made all the difference. What we know now is that that this has always been important, but after the pandemic, it's more important than ever. And there's more young people who need that type of extra attention. So I'm so glad that the American Rescue Plan allows people and school districts and school leaders to now plan to do more of what is always needed, more after school, more individualized tutoring, more summer programs, more emotional support for children, more people, nurses and experts in mental health who can be at the school. All of these things are important every year, but they've never been more important than right now. And the American Rescue Plan gives school leaders the ability to devote those resources to that and call on their communities to be part of helping young people not just catch up, but find their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and reach their potential, whatever their background. That is really our commitment. I've been very pleased to see analysis, survey of 600 school districts by the Superintendent's Association, analysis by Future Ed at Georgetown show that these resources are being used for keeping schools safe, but also hiring the extra staff needed for this emotional support, for the tutoring, for the teachers that we need. But it's not good enough, and we're not done yet. We have to learn from each other. This is a time where people want to know what are the best practices others are doing around the country. What else can we do at this critical time? I hope that this is a response that not only leads to really helping, again, young people catch up and then get ahead and reach their potential. But I hope it's a moment where we make leaps and bounds that help our children each and every year be everything that they can be. And that if they feel that they are facing an obstacle or falling behind in a course or an area, that there is always that support, always that individualized attention to help them to reach their potential. It turns lives around. And I'm very, very excited to have this all-star panel following me to talk about so many of those topics. So I'm very excited to introduce Kara Arundel from K-12 Dive to help lead our panel discussion. Kara, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jean. Today, this panel will speak about the historic investment of federal funding in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including the benefits and challenges of meeting students' academic and social emotional needs. We'll also touch on staff recruitment and retention efforts boosted by American Rescue Plan funding. So it is my pleasure to introduce this powerful panel of speakers today. First, we'll start with Deja Cooper. She's a sophomore at Ballou Senior High School in Washington, D.C., who enjoys playing softball, basketball, and being a member of the Mikvah Challenge Club at school. Deja lost her mother, and during that time, she battled with depression and found it hard to find support. Fortunately, Deja ultimately found guidance through a strong mentor. Deja wants to be an advocate for youth who suffer from depression, but sometimes are ignored and have little to no support. Susan Enfield is the superintendent of Highland Public Schools in Burren, Washington. Knowing every student by name, strength, and need is the promise of Highland Public Schools. Under Superintendent Enfield's leadership, the district is implementing its second phase of its strategic plan, committed to the academic and social emotional growth of all students so they can graduate prepared for the future they choose. A former high school English, journalism, and EL teacher, Susan also served as Chief Academic Officer and then as interim superintendent for Seattle Public Schools before starting her position in Highland in 2012. Linda Darling Hammond is president of the California State Board of Education and the Charles E. Ducommun Professor of Education Emeritus at Stanford University, where she founded the Stanford Center for Opportunity Policy and Education. Linda is past president of the American Educational Research Association and recipient of its awards for distinguished contributions to research, lifetime achievement, and research to policy. In 2006, she was named one of the nation's 10 most influential people affecting education policy. She also led the Obama Education Policy Transition Team in 2008 and the Biden Education Transition Team in 2020. Naila Suad Nasir is president of the Spencer Foundation, which invests in education research that cultivates learning and transforms lives. From 2008 to 2019, she held a faculty appointment at the University of California, Berkeley, where she also served as vice chancellor of equity and inclusion. Naila's work focuses on issues of race, culture, learning, and identity. She is the author of Racialized Identities, Race and Achievement for African American Youth, and has published numerous scholarly articles. She is a member of the National Academy of Education and a fellow of the American Educational Research Association. And Rosalia Grillier, or Miss Rose, as she is known in her Chicago community, is a nationally recognized grassroots leader. She is on the board of COFI, which is the Community Organizing and Family Issues Group. She is co-president of Power Pack, the advocacy arm of COFI that brings parents together from all across Chicago. She has received numerous awards and recognition, including being named a Chicago Hero by Allstate and the King family. She's one of the founding governing council members of the United Parent Leaders Action Network. Thank you all for being with us to share your experiences and expertise. Deja, I'd like to start with you. I think you have been brave to open up about your struggles with depression. The mental well-being of students and school staff gained much attention during the pandemic and is still really much a top priority. What are some of the barriers that you faced in seeking understanding and support for depression? And what has been the most helpful to you and other students facing similar struggles?
I would say some of the barriers would be not having anyone to talk to and feeling like no one's there. But some things that are helpful, that was helpful, was when I got back in school and I had teachers that treated me like they were my family and had talked to me about stuff that I was going through. And they actually got me out of my comfort zone, and because I don't like talking to people, so they actually got me out of my comfort zone to talk to more people about what I was going through.
I'd like to ask a quick follow-up to that because, you know, different students feel different struggles. Do you think that same approach, just being seen and heard, can help different students who are experiencing different hardships?
Yes, because a lot of students that I've talked to and know that they feel like that no one is there and people not really there to listen to them because they're a child.
Thank you. Susan, your district has been focused on the academic and social emotional growth of students, but the pandemic has disrupted school like nothing seen in recent history. Now it seems like there's so many different areas that need attention, including safety precautions, learning recovery, staff retention, equitable programming, and much more. How did your district determine the best uses for its American Rescue Plan allocation? And how will you know if the funding is making a positive impact?
Yeah, thanks, Kara. I'll begin by amplifying what Deja shared in terms of the challenging times that we all, but especially our children and young people, have been living in. And so we knew that we had to use these dollars to connect our kids back to their school community and with one another. So early on, we used many of our ARP dollars to invest in safety measures, including testing, which allowed us to bring our student athletes back sooner rather than later, which we know athletics, extracurriculars are such a connection for so many kids to their classmates and their school community. But the other thing that I will say is we also use this as an opportunity to really invest in high quality curricular materials for our students, for more intensive wraparound support. So that includes things like teletherapy, tutoring as well, so that our students have more adults that they're connected with. And I think one of the really unique things that we did is I saw this as an opportunity to engage with families and community in a truly authentic way that we typically can't do because our dollars are so segmented for specific purposes. So we actually set aside 5% of our ARP funds and created what we called CARE, our committee on allocating resources equitably. And it was made up of community members and family members. And they got to say, here's how we think we should use this $4 million. And that was huge because normally we can't do that. And they came up with things that we never would have thought of. And it was such an authentic way to engage and connect with our families and community. And so I think that what we've tried to do is focus these dollars on connection, because connection is more important than ever. And that's academics, it's social emotional, it's community, it's all of it.
Excellent. Linda, I have heard from school system leaders that with the American Rescue Plan funding, they have the budgets to hire more staff, but the shortages are so profound and they can't find the people to hire. And it's difficult to support academic and social emotional improvements with staff vacancies, especially if your current staff is overloaded with extra duties. What are some of the recruitment and retention solutions you're hearing about that are helping to address these challenges?
Well, a lot of people are using their CARES funds, their ESSER funds, for this very purpose. Places like Iowa City have been using them to improve the working conditions of staff and, hiring other support providers. Some people get out way ahead of the curve. A number of places are doing retention bonuses for staff that are making a big difference. You see that in Florida and Georgia, but also places like Los Angeles. But the most exciting thing, I think, is really capturing and keeping people at the beginning of their careers, because we've had a big drop in the pipeline. So in Illinois, they've used the money for mentoring beginning teachers who often leave very early if they don't get that extra support. Most exciting are the residency models that are cropping up in states that are getting funded from the ARPA funds and the previous funds. Texas and West Virginia are putting $20,000 in the case of Texas for residency stipends to bring teachers in. They can teach in the districts with the support of an expert teacher that they will eventually be hired by side, getting that clinical experience with wraparound coursework from their university and mentoring after they get that job. They stay at very high rates and they actually end the shortage that would be resulting from the churn of people coming in and out. We see Tennessee has started the nation's first apprenticeship program, very similar model, 63 districts across the state that are bringing people in to teaching at no cost to them with a stipend, allowing them to earn and learn, get high quality preparation, and that's going to turn the shortage around for the long term. All of it started with these funds.
Great. And I want to ask a little bit more deeper about the residency and grow your own and apprenticeships. Is it because those folks going through those programs are already connected to that community? They have investment in that community, or is there another reason?
Sometimes they're already from the community in many cases, and they're connected to the community and want to be teachers there. In other cases, they may be coming in from other occupations or even from the military and ready to start a second career. But what's really important in addition to that connection is the fact that they don't have to go into debt to become a teacher. They get a stipend of some sort while they're training. Their tuition is reduced or eliminated. They're getting a very connected experience in the classroom of one of the best teachers in the district to learn to teach urban kids well or rural kids well in that community. And their coursework and their clinical work is all tied up together. So it's a coherent, supported experience of learning to teach. And knowing that you're going to get a job in that district for the long haul is a big incentive.
Great. Naila, the pandemic continues to impact schools, teachers, parents, and students today. On one hand, this country saw educators and parents make Herculean efforts to support children. Conversely, large numbers of students were unable to participate in virtual learning classrooms or had limited access to computers and reliable Wi-Fi, and still even now having trouble with engagement. Given these stark realities, it feels timely to ask, what should define a good school, particularly now? And how do we know, and what do we know from the research about this?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so much of what we know from the research has already been reflected in the comments of my co-panelists. We know a lot from the research, particularly the science of learning and development, about what's optimal to support learning for every student, including students who are having hardships, students from marginalized groups. We know that content matters, right? Students engage when they're intellectually challenged and are doing work that's meaningful for them, and work that fosters learning and key habits of mind. We know that context matters, that it's important to build the kind of connections that Superintendent Enfield was mentioning between home life, community life, school life is just absolutely critical. And we saw new opportunities for that post-pandemic. We know that development matters, that learning involves all aspects of development: cognitive, social, emotional, identity. This is clear from the research in neuroscience. And so it's important that schools and classrooms are spaces that attend to young people's sense of connection and belonging. I think Deja talked about how she experienced that and how important that was for her. Young people, especially adolescents, need an opportunity to exert agency, choice, and voice to follow their own interests. We know that school support structures matter, right? Schools should have institutional practices that open up opportunity and offer opportunities for students to thrive and access high quality instruction, as well as mental health and other supports. Again, we've heard a bit about that already. And we know that teachers matter. A diverse, well-prepared teaching force is so important so that all students feel connected to their teachers, and teachers bring with them experiences from a range of communities. And finally, we know that assessment matters, that teachers need to be, and schools need to be engaging in assessments that give robust knowledge of what students know and can do, and that can be used to guide instruction. So we know a lot, and so much of what we know is being reflected in the best practices we're hearing about on this panel today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Ms. Rose, your experience in grassroots community collaborations has given you insights into the benefits and challenges of partnerships. Some community partnerships have strengthened during the pandemic, but these are not relationships to take for granted. In your view, what do schools need to do going forward to cultivate and maintain strong relationships with community partners?
Thank you, Kara. That's an excellent question. And thank you for saving the best for last. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the value system. Because when you value someone, you respect them. Therefore, you engage them in a real way. And the truth of the matter is, parents have a PhD in their children, in their families, and for the most part, in their communities. They know what is happening in real time and in real life. And they have a level of expertise and lived experience that, when it is respected in partnership with educators, administrators, and other educational stakeholders, is invaluable. So in essence, this means that every space and every table that has decisions that are being made concerning our children, parents should not only be a part of it as just a sign-on or an afterthought, but they should be at those tables and places and spaces as intricate partners, helping to strategize and really figure out what is best to ensure that our children are thriving academically, socially, and emotionally, and all of the things that these amazing panelists have lifted up so far should be accessible to all students in all communities. And unfortunately, some of the challenges, as not all of the districts have been forthright or transparent or worked in true partnership with parents around how those funds will be allocated through the American Rescue Plan. But I think that when we start to value and really engage parents, those creative ideas that Susan talked about are absolutely going to happen across the country.
Great. And what if a school system does have the will to build engagement and value and bring those components together, but they're not getting any reception? How can they build more momentum for that engagement with families?
I think being intentional about those relationships, first of all, having the school environment be welcoming to parents. Building relationships between the teachers and parents is so important because teachers know our children in an academic space. I heard someone lift up assessment. That is so important to know where the student is so that you can help them to get to where those goals are academically, or even the goals that the parents and families have or the students themselves have. And I so appreciate Deja, in lifting up having those conversations with students to really understand what they aspire to do. And I think when you have those kinds of partnerships, we can't lose. Our students are going to be thriving across the board because we're communicating well with each other. And that's always key.
Excellent. And that leads me right into my question for Deja. You said students who suffer from depression are sometimes ignored or have little or no support. How do you plan to help others? And what should school systems do better going forward to support students and staff?
I feel like school systems, the teachers are overwhelmed and with helping students. So I feel like the funding and stuff should go to counselors and more school workers and therapists, so that way students can have an outlet to talk. And me as a student, I would help by being that outlet that kids could come and feel comfortable with talking to me about their issues.
Great. I've heard the power of peer mentors and peer support, which is that something that you think would be helpful to giving students time to, talk to each other, help each other?
Yes. Like depression, like you can't really even focus in school or do work or worry about doing assessments and work and tests when you got so much stuff going on in your head and at home. So I feel like that's why I feel like funding should go to social workers and counselors.
Thank you. And Linda, I wanted to ask, with so many needs that are present in school systems at the moment, how realistic is it to expect that American Rescue Plan funding can solve all of the setbacks and challenges? And if that cannot or should not be an expectation, what should school communities focus on to make sure the investments are making an impact?
I think it's really important for people to think about these investments in a way that builds a strong foundation, both for children individually and for the organization, on which you can then build in the future. So for example, for children, learning recovery is so important, along with the social and emotional supports that Deja and Susan just spoke about. And making those opportunities available now will have payoff in the future for every individual, as well as for the school itself. But you think about some places where they've really invested North Carolina gave an extra 30 days to every child in every school for learning recovery work. And every district has been putting together their own approach to that. New Mexico created a program in the summer for teens to sort of earn and learn as they had work opportunities while they were also getting learning opportunities at the same time. Oklahoma did an amazing job of after school and summer school investments that are drawing community organizations in, as well as helping students sort of catch up and move ahead. Those community organizations, as we know, will really connect the community better to the schools, be a foundation on which they can build in the future. Arkansas developed a tutoring corps, again, to try to be sure that kids are getting what they need when they need it, as Ms. Rose was saying earlier. So these are foundational investments that for every one of those kids will allow them to continue on a stronger trajectory. Then on the organizational level, things like community schools are being created with these funds that actually create those relationships with those community organizations, create the long-term wraparound supports that kids will benefit from, like the mental health supports that Deja was talking about, and the kinds of whole child approaches that are so needed. So in Vermont, they used their money to start community schools in the state. In California, some of the CARES Act money was used for an initial program of community school development and piloting a couple of years ago, and now the state has put $3 billion into putting community schools in every one of the high poverty schools in the state. So that's a foundational investment on which you can build a new future that actually transforms the ways that schools operate on into the future.
Right, because I have heard from several district leaders, state leaders, the summer programs have been so popular. This isn't summer school from, years ago. This is a brand new enrichment, and some communities can't imagine not having it again, but it will take those community partnerships to keep them going, not only with momentum and support, but funding.
Yeah, in California, we called last summer our Summer of Joy, and we intend to continue that. And now we've got legislation that will actually invest in that kind of support on indefinitely.
Great. And on that same note, I wanted to ask Susan, you talked about engagement, and it reminded me of my conversations with school leaders when I asked them, what are some of the fun ways you're using your ARP money? They talked about field trips and those little moments. I'm wondering if you could give us an example of something in your school districts, might be, a little pot of money that really went a long way with bringing the community together.
Well, as I said, we set aside some funds for our community and families to determine how to be used. And one of the things they came up with, which I would never have been on my list, is accessible play structures on our playgrounds. We know more than ever that the power of play, the power of our children relearning how to interact in a social setting with one another is incredibly important. And frankly, so all children can play. And that was brilliant. We wouldn't have come up with that. They did. And so I love that we're being creative about that. But I do want to add this, Kara. I think we as district leaders have a tremendous responsibility to invest these dollars wisely. To Linda's point, are we creating a foundation on which we can build moving forward rather than creating a cliff, which we're all going to fall off of after the dollars go away? And so one of the things that we also did in Highline is we used some of our dollars to hire a project manager to actually manage all of our ESSER projects. And we have a dashboard on our website. So to Ms. Rose's point, so that our families can go online and see how we're using these dollars. We've created videos showing the impact of what we're doing. And I will also say that many superintendent colleagues and myself are also hoping that there may be consideration for extending the use of these dollars, because I can tell you my colleagues and I want these dollars to have maximum impact in the lives of our children and staff. And we are limited right now in how we can do that. And I'll give you an example. To Deja's point, we know that we need more counseling and supports for our students. We have amazing mental health partners in our community, and we have funds set aside to partner with them. They're at capacity. The needs in our schools right now are greater than what our schools and even our schools in partnership with community organizations can do. And so what I'm hoping is that we can extend these funds so that we can really continue to invest them in ways that we know our students and staff need and deserve, rather than spend them to spend them, which none of us wants to do. And frankly, which I think would be a huge disappointment, rightfully so, to those in our community who, to Ms. Rose's point, I think have very high expectations for how we use these resources in a way that tangibly benefits our children and young people.
Great. And on that note, I wanted to ask Naila, the ARP funds have supported pandemic recovery efforts in local schools and districts. We've seen that, we're hearing about it. What do you see as the role of philanthropy? Thank you. Philanthropy in educational improvement.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a great question because, of course, we know that the private dollars that come from philanthropy are relatively small compared to public dollars. So philanthropy's sweet spot tends to be to demonstrate what might be possible, to invest in demonstrations of what might be possible, to spark public investment funding. And one way I could see this playing out is funding studies of these kinds of innovations that you all are sharing that the ARP funds that sparked, and then funding opportunities for schools and districts to pilot ways to build on these innovations. I think another really interesting opportunity for private philanthropy is to lean into the kind of innovations around summer school and after school spaces that we're seeing happening in schools and districts, and how important, as Linda mentioned, the Summer of Joy, how important those kind of spaces are to open up the space for that joy and that creativity and exploration on the part of young people. So I think that could also be an interesting place for philanthropic investment. And the other thing philanthropy does well is to set a table for a conversation. And I think there are many tables that could be set to share the practices that have worked. If you think about these funds as in some ways a massive experiment in what happens when you invest and provide some discretionary dollars to provide places for people to share those innovations, to think about what's needed for them to be implemented well, would also be potentially really valuable.
And is there if a school district wants to partner with an organization, should they wait till that organization reaches out to them? Can they reach out to that organization? Is there any formula to that?
Well, you know what they say about philanthropy is if you know one foundation, you know one foundation. So it really varies widely the ways that foundations want to and have the capacity to partner with schools and districts. But I do think there are certainly foundations where those types of where reaching out and sharing the work that's happening is a good way to go. But it does vary widely. I mean, I think one of the pieces of advice I might give is it's typically best practice to find a foundation who's working on issues that are aligned with what it is you're working on. And it's in that partnership that I think really great collaborations between foundations and schools and districts and other types of providers can really happen.
Thank you so much. And it looks like our time is running down. I know we could talk for hours on this, and I just want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and insights. Thank you all so much.
I want to thank our panelists for a great discussion, clarifying the work ahead of us. The issues noted, student supports, mental health support, learning recovery, parent engagement, and well-equipped educators underscore the critical value of the partnership between the Department of Education and the National Public Education Support Fund, the organization I have the honor of leading. This connection supports our schools, students, and families by empowering districts and communities with the resources and information they need to maximize the use and impact of the Federal American Rescue Plan funding. We can accomplish more together through our vision of unity than we can alone. As a unique family of networks, including the Education Funded Strategy Group and the Grant Makers for Thriving Youth, just to name a few, NPESF holds a shared commitment to creating pathways for educational equity and providing resources to strengthen and sustain healthy learning environments that all children deserve and need to thrive. As gathered from the panel discussion, we are in a moment where we must set aside our differences and work collaboratively and honestly with each other if we want to successfully equip our children and families with the maximum support they need to realize a better future. Under our organizational strategies, learn, connect, act, and support, we will aim to enhance the work of our networks, leverage this partnership, and amplify the work of education philanthropy. Education philanthropy plays a critical role in this dynamic ecosystem and has a long history of improving the conditions and systems that many children and families face today. This evening, the Department of Ed and MPESF are excited to shine a light on some of these investments to date and into the future. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested $17 million in high impact tutoring. The Charles Stewart Mott Foundation has invested $14.4 million to support after-school programs across the country. The Rakes Foundation has invested $10 million to support organizations aimed at accelerating learning and expanding access to mental health supports. Over $9 million has been invested from the Stewart Foundation to support summer learning, learning recovery, educator workforce, and mental health initiatives. The Overdeck Family Foundation has invested $9 million to accelerate students' academic recovery and address the teacher shortage. $6 million has been invested by the William Floor Hewlett Foundation to provide support and technical assistance to districts on how to effectively use American Rescue Plan funds and sustain recovery efforts beyond the life of the American Rescue Plan. And the W. Clement and Jesse V. Stone Foundation has invested $240,000 to support projects to address the impacts of the pandemic on children, students, and educators, and to address inequities made worse by the pandemic. In addition to our continued support of our networks, MPESF will explore ways to collaborate with other philanthropic networks to support schools, districts, and communities, including spotlighting best practices for districts and states so that they have the opportunity to learn and potentially identify smart and effective ways to utilize the American Rescue Plan funds. We look forward to your participation as we move forward. MPESF believes in the power of the collective, and this partnership and today's summit are evidence of that. So if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, by all means, let's figure out how to go together. In that spirit, please join the upcoming virtual learning sessions. These are nearly 20 sessions detailing how organizations, communities, and school districts are using the American Rescue Plan dollars to support learning recovery, mental health, and labor shortages. But first, before moving there, to support us in moving into our learning sessions, I'm excited to introduce the Stewart Hobson Jazz Ensemble. Under the direction of saxophonist B.J. Simmons, is a group of student musicians that study at the Stewart Hobson Middle School, a member of the Capitol Hill cluster in Northeast DC. This gifted group of middle schoolers has the tenacity and hunger to study privately outside of Stewart Hobson Middle School. They come together twice a week to learn a variety of challenging compositions that stretch their harmonic and melodic knowledge. The current ensemble includes Masi Tall Jr. on alto saxophone, Ian Robinson on trumpet, Leo Smock on piano, Jacob Scott on electric bass, Harper Hansen on guitar, and Nasir Dinkins on drums. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy.